If we're ready to reconvene, we're missing a couple commissioners. We have enough? We have Joe? We can, okay, we're good. We're going to move now to item 21, which is a public hearing on the Southern California draft for the 2018 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Guidelines. Laura.
Hello, Commissioners. Yes, this is an informational item. It is the second and final statutorily required hearing for the draft Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Guidelines, which have been prepared pursuant to the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. As you recall, the first hearing was held at your October meeting in Stockton. The guidelines development process began in July, and for the past 6 months, staff has worked closely with Caltrans, California Air Resources Board staff, other state agencies, regional and local agencies, and other stakeholders to develop the guidelines. 4 public workshops were held, and 2 drafts were circulated for review and comment. All comments received to date have been posted online. Any changes made to the draft since the version that was presented to you back in October are noted in strike-through and underline in Attachment B of Tab 22. A couple areas of note in the final draft that I wanted to bring to your attention. References to Caltrans' statewide corridor planning guidebook have been minimized in our guidelines, and this is due to the fact that the guidebook has not yet been publicly released. Caltrans does plan to complete this effort in early 2019, and once it goes through a stakeholder vetting process and is finalized, we will incorporate it into a future iteration of our guidelines. I also wanted to note that these guidelines have been developed in recognition that corridor planning is a time and resource-intensive process. As such, the guidelines endeavor to articulate the objectives for corridor plans as outlined in the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, while providing flexibility for agencies to progressively align their planning efforts in preparation for the upcoming Cycle 2 and for future cycles of the program. I do have a minor technical addition to the guidelines that I will be reading into the record for your consideration during adoption, which will be part of the next item. And this stems from the fact that the guidelines mention regional transportation plans in several places, but they are missing a reference to the statutory requirements for those plans. So staff will add a footnote to the guidelines in this regard. So with that, the purpose of this hearing is to provide an opportunity for any final stakeholder input prior to your consideration of the final draft guidelines for adoption, which is proposed under tab 22. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have at this time. Otherwise, we can open the public hearing for comment.
Okay. Do I have any questions or comments from my commissioners? Okay, I do have some speaker requests, so let's open it for public comment. Martha Van Rooyen, California Emerging Technology Fund.
Good afternoon. My name is Martha Van Rooyen, and I am assisting the California Emerging Technology Fund, which commonly is referred to as CETF, in addressing broadband in the multimodal corridor plan. As you may know, CETF President and CEO Sunny Wright McPeak was the former Business, Transportation, and Housing Secretary. You also heard from my colleague Ann Spalding with CETF at your October 17th meeting in Stockton. I am the executive director as well of the Inland Empire Regional Broadband Consortium, which covers both Riverside and San Bernardino counties. There are 16 regional consortia statewide funded through the California Public Utilities Commission. The mission of the regional consortia is to support the California Advanced Services Fund, known as CASF, for broadband infrastructure, access, and adoption throughout the state. We would like to thank the CTC and the staff, especially Garth Hopkins and Laura Pennebaker, for incorporating both CTF and regional broadband consortia input into the draft 2018 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Guidelines, and for recognizing the potential of broadband deployment to reduce congestion along major corridors and reduce impacts on the environment. Broadband is a green strategy that helps reduce vehicle miles traveled and assist in the state's goals and regional goals and greenhouse gas emission reduction. We want to support the draft guidelines, so we are here to let you know that. We would also like to thank Caltrans for their support in their upcoming guidebook. Caltrans has indicated that they will be taking the information from the multimodal corridor plan and take the broadband concepts that have been developed in this plan and appropriately include them into the Caltrans corridor guidebook. We do want to mention that planning staff Chris Schmidt, Scott Sauer, Brian Seamy, and Rusty Thornton worked tirelessly, as well as with Garth and Laura Pennybaker, to help do broadband stakeholder meeting, which was held in Sacramento at the Department of Technology on September 27th. We urge the CTC, Caltrans, and local transportation planning organizations to incorporate conduit for high-speed internet infrastructure into all transportation projects along designated strategic corridors, whether or not there's an internet service provider or an ISP identified or requesting an encroachment permit at the time. In fact, we believe that broadband planning should be incorporated into all of the planning for transportation facilities, which would be including the CTC multimodal corridor plan guidelines, as well as referencing continually in all planning work the guidelines that were done under AB 1549 for a dig once policy, and those guidelines at Caltrans are called Incorporating Wired Broadband Facilities on State Highway Right-of-Way User Guide. We would like this information to be referenced in future planning, just like you referenced the Smart Mobility Framework, Complete Streets, etc. As you heard at your October 17th Northern California CTC hearing, that broadband stakeholder meeting that was held on September 27th was very productive. You were provided a stakeholder meeting summary report, which was a packet with a map showing a list of strategic corridors by region that was prepared by the Regional Broadband Consortia. So I'm here today to give you an update on that map. That was in a draft form, so in the packet that you've received is there's an 11 by 17, there's also just stapled in the back a regular 8.5 by 11, but there's an 11 by 17 of an update of the corridors that the Regional Broadband Consortia statewide felt that they should be targeted first, as far as including broadband in maintenance, operations, and major projects on these corridors. So that's been provided to you today. You've also been provided the CETF publication called Broadband in the Environment, which addresses VMT and GHG reductions, as well as a multitude of environmental benefits from broadband. For example, telecommuting, 1 day a week, could provide huge results in VMT and GHG reduction. By having improved broadband, whether it be in a rural area, an urban area that's been on decline from economic development, where there hasn't been a lot of broadband improvement, or it's in a disadvantaged community, we believe that utilizing transportation facilities, whether they be Caltrans, regional authority, transportation authority, or local government, to help deploy broadband will help improve opportunities for telecommuting, online learning, telehealth, and many other reasons why we get in the car to do trips today. So moving forward, we will be working with Caltrans and CalCog to convene meetings with the 12 Caltrans district directors and the regional transportation organizations to discuss how to incorporate broadband into transportation projects. CTC will be invited to participate. We want to emphasize that the extensive planning effort you've undertaken with the inclusion of broadband planning concepts should not be a topic limited to staying in the confines of this document. It is information that should be included as a routine matter in every other CTC and Caltrans planning and policy documents where it would apply. And the regional transportation authorities and local government should be encouraged to take this leadership into their own regions to include broadband as they plan for their own transportation facilities. We just met with AT&T.
I'm going to have to ask you, you're going a little bit
Thank you.
long, so
We
let's
just
wrap.
We just met with AT&T, and they indicated that every 5G deployment will need a fiber installation. So whether it's wireless or whether it's wireline, there is a role for transportation facilities. I appreciate the time on this important issue, and thank you for your consideration.
Okay, do we have any questions of the speaker? Hearing none, I'll call the, oh, was there a question? Yes, Commissioner Dunn.
Can I, may I?
Okay, well, Dunn and then.
I just need to ask a super simple question. You're saying the deployment of 5G is going to demand more fiber connections? So are we talking, okay, so a fiber connection to the structure, and then you'd be using your wireless in that area? Your
Yeah.
cell phone and other things?
So, you know, people do understand fiber related to what they've seen traditionally versus wireless. Well, the 5G deployments, regardless of what company is doing it, will have a fiber backhaul that then connects to another fiber connection. They will be tight together, like a mesh, but there will be more fiber construction and installation than what an average person is considering who's not doing the deployment. And that was presented recently. We've tried to get the word out, but that's something of partnership and cooperation with Caltrans and other regional transportation authorities and local government could really end up with some win-win partnerships and opportunities to work with the communication and ISP providers. They also will be deploying on streetlights, and there's some opportunities to work with them on streetlights and other poles. Thank you.
Just a quick question. Thank you very much for your presentation. I truly am a fan of the work that this organization is doing. And I want to remind my colleagues what they heard yesterday at CARB, where more people nationally are telecommuting than riding transit. This makes this strategy a really important strategic play for our state. And so thank you very much for your presentation. I will keep track of it.
Thank you.
I have just one little question for you. In terms of any resources to help do this, does your organization represent any partnership opportunities to bring resources to the costs associated with doing this?
What we are looking at is we're doing a study. We've actually applied for a Caltrans Sustainable Communities grant to answer that question as to what really is the cost of what we're talking about. Where would the opportunities be? And we have partnered with SCAG, who is our sponsor for the grant, and the sub-applicants are the regional consortia, the regional broadband consortia in the SCAG region, which includes Imperial County, Ventura, Los Angeles, and Riverside and San Bernardino counties. There just isn't a consortium set up in Orange County, but we always include you. CETF is also a sub-applicant, so we're trying to lead and get that information so that in moving forward, we can understand what this budget item really is. Our strategy was to ask for strategic corridors where, for example, we met with the fairground representatives, and they said, right now we've had disasters. They need to have broadband deployment before the disaster, and it turns out that the majority of the fairgrounds are very close to state highways. So there's a connectivity to be able to extend the deployment or to overcome maybe it is an obstacle that it might be now. It also takes years right now to do processes to include conduit after the fact. So we are we would be available for any discussion, anytime between CETF and the regional consortia to help move this along. We also know that you're going to need it in your own facilities for autonomous vehicles and the technology that's coming. So we know there's shared opportunity and shared reasons for moving forward. So we're open. We extend our hand and always want to be there for the CTC and Caltrans to provide any guidance or data or any kind of information to ease the load. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so Next speaker, Don Etzies. Am I saying your name wrong? Etzies? Oh, Betsy's. I'm sorry, Don. Sandag, right?
Yes, yes. Don Batiste with the San Diego Association of Governments. Keith Dunn had to leave, but he did fail to mention something and asked me to congratulate San Benito on their self-help success in November. So as a fellow self-help agency, we're very excited for them. I'm here today on behalf of the San Diego Association of Governments, wanting to express our appreciation to CTC and staff in development of the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan guidelines, and in working diligently to involve all stakeholders and provide opportunity for input. We support adoption of the guidelines today. We appreciate recognition of the need for multimodal capacity strategies for personal travel and goods movement. The guidelines provide flexibility for MPOs and other agencies to be able to put forward projects that best meet their regional or local needs. We support inclusion of technologies and system management in the corridor planning process to help us meet objectives of managing congestion, improving system operations, and addressing climate and air quality. We look forward to working with our transportation partners to conduct truly robust multimodal corridor plans. And in closing, we want to thank you for your leadership and partnership that supports the successful delivery of critical multimodal projects in congested transportation corridors. And in that light, on your calendar, on your adopted calendar, you have a meeting in San Diego in May, and we would like to extend an invitation to tour the I-5 North Coast Corridor, one of the largest solutions for congested corridors projects. And we look forward to seeing you in May in San Diego. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We know that corridor. Okay, next we have Philip Chu, SBCTA.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Philip Chu with San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, representing the SCAG region. Just want to provide a couple of comments on the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan guidelines. First off, we appreciate the hard work and collaboration with CTC staff in finalizing the guidelines, and we support the adoption of the guidelines. We feel that the guideline is very important and will help guide the Solution for Congested Corridor program, which is an important program in SB1 because of the amount of funding and the multimodal role of the program. We also appreciate the changes proposed, which will provide the needed flexibility to the regions to deliver effective and transformative projects in the future, including the outreach of to the end user and the public in project development, as well as making sure that the guidelines focus on congestion reduction. And thank you, and that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Kenneth, we're going to ask you to come on down, followed by Linda.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kenneth Cow with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I would like to also extend my appreciation and thanks to your staff, Laura and Garth, on their hard work on these guidelines. MTC wrote a comment letter, and generally we support the goals and the guidelines, and we recommend your approval of them. And again, thank you to the Commission staff who has considered our comments, and I'm really happy to have that page 5 notation for the roles, the legislative roles of the RTPAs just kind of mentioned in there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Linda Commission, California Bicycle Coalition, right?
That's right. Good afternoon. My name is Linda Commission with the California Bicycle Coalition. I just also wanted to extend our support for the adoption of these guidelines and express our gratitude for your staff, especially Executive Director Susan Branson, who has helped to improve the engagement of the community and stakeholders in the process of the development of these guidelines, and as well Laura Pennebaker, who's fielded those questions and those comments. We we want to continue to engage on the recommendations made specifically on a letter from a broad coalition of stakeholders, transportation stakeholders, and dated on August 27th, as you know. And so we want to work with you specifically through the program development to really look at the criteria that is listed in statute and how we can better define giving transportation choices at these corridors specifically. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Linda? Hearing none, I think we're good. Thank you very much. I don't have any other public comments on that, so I think we can close the public hearing if that's last call for the public. Okay, we will move on now to item 22. Laura?
Commissioners, this is an action item. The 2018 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan guidelines have been developed in consultation with numerous stakeholders to comply with the statutory requirements of the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. I want to sincerely thank everyone who engaged in this process. Their feedback and insight was invaluable. Staff has one minor technical addition in section 7 at the bottom of page 5 of the document. A footnote will be added to the last sentence on that page that will read as follows. Regional transportation plans are required to have a public participation process and are prepared pursuant to state and federal requirements. These requirements are outlined in the Regional Transportation Plan Guidelines adopted by the Commission pursuant to Government Code Section 14522. The guidelines are available at, and we will insert a link to the Commission's website where the guidelines can be accessed. So with that change noted, staff recommends your adoption of the 2018 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Guidelines.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Van Konynenberg, and a second was by Commissioner Medapfer. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Phew, Laura, good job.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay, item 23, Matthew.
Commissioners, tab 23 is an action item to approve a program amendment for the 2018 Solutions for Congested Corridors program. This book item has a minor revision to its resolution in attachment A, which you have as a yellow. The 2018 Solutions for Congested Corridors program was adopted during the Commission's May 2018 meeting. The adopted program of projects included the US 101 Managed Lane project in San Mateo County, programmed with $200 million in congested corridors funding. This program amendment will divide the delivery of this project into two segments, a southern segment and a northern segment. Of the original $200 million programmed to the overall project, $74,810,000 will be appropriated to the southern segment, and $125,190,000 will be appropriated to the northern segment. This item is consistent with Solutions for Congested Corridor Program guidelines and the adopted program. Therefore, staff recommends your approval of tab 23 as presented in this staff recommendation.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gardino, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Mr. Vice Chair, I wish to cede the gavel to you as I need to recuse myself in regard to item 24, as my employer, Majestic Realty, owns property in the near proximity to the discussion item.
All right.
As our chair exits, Matthew, if you could.
Yeah, there you go. Yours is that one.
As our chair exits, Matthew, if you could give me that $200 million to take back to the Bay Area, I would appreciate it.
Certainly, that'll be coming up, I believe, in item 90.
Great.
Okay, I think we're ready to do item. Right. Right. Yes, item 24. Don Chesser is going to make the presentation.
Yes, I am. Thank you. So, Commissioners, tab
It's item 24, by the way.
Thank you. So tab 24 is an action item to remove the Central Valley Gateway project from the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. As stated in the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program guidelines, projects programmed with capital funds must file a CEQA notice of determination within 6 months of programming. The Commission programmed $12.78 million in Trade Corridor funds on the May 16, 2018 meeting, thereby requiring the CEQA notice of determination to be filed by November 16th. Executive Director Branson, along with Commissioner Paul and various Commission staff, has met jointly with the City of Tracy, Caltrans, and the San Joaquin County Council of Governments to discuss the requirements and potential options to meet this program requirement. At this time, a notice of determination that covers the scope of work programmed by the Commission has not been filed. Therefore, consistent with the Trade Corridor Program guidelines, staff recommends the removal of the Central Valley Gateway project. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I believe we have a couple of speakers.
Okay. Do we have a question? Yes, Commissioner Van Cononenberg.
So this is never easy to remove a project from the system, but I think we are hopeful that they'll be able to come around in the next round. So I want to thank staff. I want to thank Director Agar for his team. I want to thank the City of Tracy for all their help on this as well.
Okay, any other questions from the Commission? We do have one speaker, Andrew Malik.
Yes, thank you. Chair, Commissioners, staff, and Assembly Member Andrew Malik. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Tracy. As you said, this is a rare event. It's certainly rare for Tracy. It's a first for me in the 22 years that I've been with Tracy. We did a little bit of experiment with this project, working with a private developer that we partnered with that took the lead on some of managing of this. That experiment failed, and we're here before you at the repercussion of that. We have a great working relationship with Caltrans. We've engaged them, and as mentioned earlier, we plan to resubmit for that application. In fact, District 10 has said that they would be very supportive of that. In that reapplication, I would hope that the CTC would also be supportive in that effort. So I just had those comments to make. Happy to answer any questions if you have.
Not all developers are flakes.
Nope. Actually, they're very good, and they're doing. We have a very good relationship with them. This just wasn't there. That experiment just didn't work this time.
Okay. Do I hear a motion? Okay. We have a motion from Commissioner Van Conenberg, and I think Commissioner Tavoloni had the second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. That's the only one we need to do? All right. Well, she might still be checking out our properties. I don't know. Oh, that one isn't mine, isn't it? Okay.
Put my mic back on. Now we'll move to item 25. Zelam, Inspector General Report.
Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioner. This is an information item. Senate Bill 1 created the Independent Office of Audits and Investigation with Caltrans. And SB 1 requires the Inspector General to provide a summary report of investigation and audits findings and recommendations at least annually to the Governor, the Legislature, and the Commission. The Transportation Inspector General, Irena Ortega, released her report last month, and she's here to present her report.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here for the first time addressing the Commission. Again, for the record, I'm Irena Ortega, the Inspector General for Caltrans. What I have for you here is a set of slides that are kind of excerpts from the report, but you have the full report in your agenda packet, so feel free to ask questions from either of those. I'll start with a little bit of background, which I think might be helpful to public members who are also here today. SB1 created the Independent Office of Audits and Investigations and the position of Inspector General. I was appointed by the governor last fall and started in the office in January. I was confirmed in July of this year, and I will serve a 6-year term. This is, again, the first report that we are submitting to the legislature, the governor, and the CTC. What I wanted to do was establish kind of a timeline of issuing a report every November, which would reflect the previous fiscal year's activity. A couple things I would want you to know about this report is I anticipate that future reports will have kind of more layers to them as we add on additional responsibilities. For example, we are just beginning to start tracking what happens to findings and recommendations. SB1 requires the report to address the status of recommendations, and in the past those were not really tracked. So that information is not available now, but I expect next November we would be talking about the status of those findings and recommendations. So as you look at the report, I think next year you'll see each page will have another layer of information behind it, and so I look forward to presenting that in the future. Let's see, I cannot see there we go. So let me start with the big picture summary. The activity for 2017-18, 126 audits were completed. So again, I didn't start until January, so many of these audits were completed before I came on board. This report does not include all 126 audits. Those could all be found on our office's website. Those reports are kind of issued as they're completed throughout the year. This is just an attempt to tell you what the kind of summary level information is about how many reports were completed. So again, 126 audits. A few of them that are highlighted in the report, the baseline audit, as we call it. This was an audit of how Caltrans is establishing a baseline for those major asset classes in SB1. This was our attempt to look at, as we're measuring progress towards those SB1 outcomes in the future, did we start at a reasonable place? Is there a justification for how that data would be analyzed going forward to ensure that the outcomes are being met? The efficiencies is another report that we did. I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the report here because we're doing kind of a part 2 on the efficiencies. This audit that was issued in the spring was really about the methodology the department was using to establish the efficiencies that were reported to you in October. We didn't look at the actual dollars that were reported, but looked at how the department would be establishing methodology, tracking, and identifying those efficiencies. A couple others that I would highlight. The largest category you'll see is the Prop 1B audits. Those were the required audits of each of the Prop 1B recipients. Over time, of course, you'll see that number will go down. That's the largest category of audits that were completed. Moving on to the next section. There's a lot of work that goes on in the Independent Office of Audits and Investigations related to local agencies. I'm not sure how much information has really been made available to folks in the past about what those activities are. Local agencies submit their indirect cost rates to the department. Our folks review those rates. Unless those rates are approved, they cannot bill the department for overhead. A lot of this work is really related to the state's stewardship agreement with the federal government. This is a large portion of the workload of the existing audit staff that Caltrans had even prior to the establishment of the Inspector General. A couple of other things on this list in the local agency area. There were some specific audits, and of course, I think you all might be familiar with the couple of ATP audits that were completed in the fiscal year, the Arvin and Compton ATP audits. Those are reported here in the local agency area, and I'll talk a little bit more about ATP at the end. Another area that we have quite a few staff dedicated to is something that we call financial document reviews for architectural and engineering firms. This is really a service that we provide for the department's Division of Procurement. and contracting. This is reviewing contracts that come in from the A&E firms, and a large part of what occurs here is determining whether the cost that they propose would be appropriate, allowable, reasonable. There are some big cost avoidance that happens here. So this is sort of a production environment where those contracts come in and our folks review them and then put out recommendations back to the department about what should and should not be included in contracts. Moving on from some of the audit work is the investigations. The office has about 7 full-time equivalent investigators. In the past fiscal year, there were 91 allegations of misconduct that were investigated or reviewed, at least on a preliminary basis, by those staff. 31 of them turned into formal investigations, and of those, 28 were founded. I think once it becomes a formal investigation, it's likely that there's enough information that it's going to go down the road of being founded. The 91 is sort of the bigger number of, some of those end up being just mistaken information or things that are more minor in nature and maybe addressed in a more progressive nature by management. The majority of these 91 allegations come from within the department, so this is the department's management identifying an issue and raising it with investigations, although there are a handful that come in from the state auditor's whistleblower hotline, and occasionally a law enforcement entity is working on something that might bring in an issue related to a Caltrans representative. This is a new program that we've taken on. The department had established an ethics helpline several years ago now. That ethics helpline was transferred to our office in January. So I will note here that this is only 6 months worth of calls and data coming in. So don't be surprised when the number is significantly larger next year. We have a full year of reporting. These types of complaints that come in, I would not put them in the same category as the allegations of misconduct. Sometimes they are coworkers reporting nuisance or disruptive behavior in the workplace, and they are addressed at a lower level, don't tend to find themselves necessitating a formal investigation. It's more an issue needs to be resolved. Our folks who look into those complaints kind of work with the management to figure out what's the most appropriate way to address those complaints. I wanted to say a couple words about the office and how we've organized and kind of thinking about the best way to achieve kind of what the overall mission of SB1 related to our office is about ensuring efficiency, ensuring the use of transportation funds is appropriate. When I came into the office, it was very much organized around kind of which entity was being audited. So an internal audit would be an audit of Caltrans, an external audit would be a local agency or maybe a construction contract. We have shifted things in an effort to develop more programmatic expertise within the staff. And so you'll see here that we have kind of reorganized around program areas and grouped the Caltrans programs in a way that we think will lead the auditors to have a little more expertise and be able to make bigger picture recommendations and not be focused solely on maybe the issues they identify with a particular auditee. I can't thank the staff that I, for the most part, inherited for being willing to work with me on these changes. The layering the Inspector General position and the new functions was really put on top of an existing office and existing staff, and everyone's been great and supportive in figuring out how to make it work. And I think we've come up with a structure that will be beneficial going forward. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about an issue that you did touch on earlier in Vince's presentation, which is SB 103. It's a bill that came a few months after SB 1 and had a number of issues addressed in it that were really, I would call them kind of leftover issues from the SB 1 discussion. And then a new area was addressed that was not as fleshed out in SB 1, and this is the legislature's prioritization of issues around diversity and And the way I think about it is really, a lot of the conversation I saw is about prioritizing, making sure that everyone in California, traditionally disadvantaged groups, anyone, that everyone would have a chance to benefit from the economic activity that SB1 generates. And that's both on the contracting side, so contracting with Caltrans and local agencies, and also on the employment side. There are several provisions of the bill that talk about Caltrans's efforts to diversify its workforce. So in that light, the governor appointed a deputy inspector general for diversity and small business, Debbie Lumpkin. She's here. I'm going to ask her to wave, say hi. Debbie's actually located in the District 7 office in Los Angeles, and she's really in charge of our developing our program to bring some oversight around the contracting opportunities for disadvantaged business in particular, and then of course all of the traditionally disadvantaged groups mentioned in SB 103. SB 103 is also the only place where the legislature put a very specific topic of reporting for the Inspector General. So SB 1 is very general about reporting requirements, talks about reporting summaries of information. SB 103 has a specific requirement to report on Caltrans's efforts around outreach to disadvantaged business enterprise, and again, the groups that are listed in the bill. So to date, we have worked with Caltrans in a kind of consultant role to help them put together a report that they have to submit to the legislature in January. I think that was a very successful effort, working with Janice Elias and the Office of Business and Economic Opportunity. And then at some point in the future, we'll be submitting a report to the legislature on those outreach efforts. This discussion here is a little bit about kind of the blue side of this picture is what SB1 requires in terms of interactions with different representatives. So it talks about specifically about keeping the director and the chief deputy director informed. It has a specific mention about making sure that the agency secretary is aware of any potential issues within the department. And then of course it has the annual required summary report to the commission, the legislature, and the governor. The right side is more kind of my aspirational part of this, which is looking at ways to incorporate more formal interaction between other folks. I've certainly had meetings with legislators, with legislative staff, the budget folks, or governor's office on an ad hoc basis, but I am thinking about how to develop those relationships in a more formal way so that we can get input into our audit plan, can hear what other people think are the issues, just kind of establish that feedback loop of making sure that we're looking at things that other people are also concerned about. Going to some reports that I expect to be coming out between now and the end of the fiscal year. There is, SB1 required us to ensure the department has an effective risk management program. So that's something we'll be wrapping up in January, is an audit of the existing program and maybe making some recommendations about risk management in the department. Active transportation program accountability, I'll talk a little more about that next. Disadvantaged business enterprise program, the certification process. This is one of the audits being led by Debbie. This is looking at certification of those businesses. The efficiency measures, again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. The progress toward SB1 performance outcomes, that's an audit that is mentioned in the report that we highlighted some of the findings. We did not have an opportunity to get into the pavement asset class, and so that's kind of a follow-up to the previous report. We want to look more closely at the pavement asset class. And then another one Debbie is leading is the review of the department's plan to prevent discrimination or preferences in employment or contracting practices, and again, this is mentioned in SB 103. So on to the active transportation program. This was an area that when I first started in this role, I was getting a lot of questions and comments about concerns that people had about some particular issues, and that led us to look at doing kind of a report that is going to be a little different than a traditional just single audit where we have findings of particular entities. We're looking at kind of putting those findings from a number of audits together into a report about how to maybe enhance the accountability around the program in total. So that it'll be looking at a review we did with the Division of Local Assistance at Caltrans and what they've put in place to make the program accountable, and then also what we found with some of the local entities where we've looked at the outcomes of their grants and their practices for receiving and expending those funds. And then again, just to finish on the efficiency measures, we did a report that really just looked at methodology. So you received, we looked at the department's draft report that was issued, I think, in January. We made some comments about the methodologies, the estimates, some of the information in there, and I think that was helpful. We got a lot of positive feedback from the department that it was helpful in them finalizing the report that you saw in October, so that they could really, going forward, have the documentation to show how the efficiencies are being tracked and met. So what we're proposing and has begun in the last few weeks is a follow-up on now looking at the final report that you saw in October is verifying some of that information. So on the NEPA delegation, verifying the information they actually provided you, on the value analysis, and the construction manager, general contractors looking at are those estimates that are in there reasonable? Are the estimates reasonable? Is it possible? Is it going to be possible for the department to actually track those savings going forward, so that you'd actually be able to account for the savings that are proposed to be generated? So that's an audit that you'll see by the end of the year. And then this is obviously the contact information for our office, but I wanted to really highlight that we have established a new website that's just, it's separate from the department's website. It's really a very stripped down and simple website. The point of it is for you to be able to find any report or audit that you want to find. So you will be able to find all of the audits that are issued. Over time, there will be more information there about corrective action plans and the status of those recommendations, that sort of thing. And then, of course, any report that we put out to the legislature, anything that would come before the commission would be able to be found there as well. We want to make it accessible to the public and easy for people to find. I've been, in the last couple of days, finding myself using it as an easy way rather than looking in the directory of all the files. Just go to the website and there's the report. So I think that's the end of my slides, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, Commissioner Van Kynenberg.
So on the previous slide, the verification of estimated savings from Caltrans efficiency measures, you're comfortable with that the methodology and the metrics are meaningful?
Yes, we're comfortable that the methodology is meaningful. I think the department used our recommendations to come up with how they will do it. I think what we want to do is then go back and say, did they put the processes in place to actually do it the way that we think would be best at making sure it was accurate?
Great. And then, do you think there would ever be a time where it would be within your scope to consider best practices of methodology and metrics to rate performance for Caltrans, for your office to say, you know, you're using this metric, but you really should be looking at another metric that's used in another arena?
Yeah, I certainly think that's within the scope. I think at this point, I would say we need to develop a little more expertise in being able to see some experience with some of those audits and reviews and look at, I'll give the example of the value analysis. The auditor who worked on how the estimating is occurring and how that information is going to be tracked over time, what the process is for generating those savings. She's developed a tremendous amount of expertise now in value analysis, and what I'm trying to push her to think about is, okay, how do you then look at that and the information that comes from that process to make broader recommendations, to say, is there something in there that's helpful to share beyond an individual audit finding?
Yeah, I was thinking, and I appreciate that, I was thinking in terms of, you mentioned you looked at contracting and how contracts were, I want to go to your earlier slide.
The A&E contracts.
Yes.
Mhm.
Is there any part of that where you looked at that and said, hey, we should look at best practices on this contracting, or were you comfortable that best practices are being followed, you're just trying to audit whether?
No, I think that is an evolving thing in terms of, I'm not sure if I would use the word best practices, but the auditors, the folks who look at the contracts, and they look at so many of them, they develop trends, and they see where the issues are, that they're continuously finding a particular area that's being inappropriately billed or charged. They do turn those repeated findings into guidance that then they go back to the firms and say, here's a big picture guidance, you're doing this wrong, do it differently. And I think that does result in efficiencies and gives more comfort that the contracts that we're getting are better.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Yes, Chair Frazier?
So I appreciate you coming out and giving us a breakdown on this exemplary work. And I'm glad that I was part of the audit hearing last Thursday in the Capitol with high-speed rail. And again, it's the ability for you as a separate entity to be able to discern good practices and appropriate behavior. And seeing the value that you've already brought in savings on contracts from the locals, and also bar none is exceptional. One of the things that I didn't see in this process, maybe you can explain to me, are you also looking at the dispute resolution process that goes on between contractors and the agency, and it's done in an appropriate manner?
That isn't something that's in the 1819 audit plan. It isn't, it's certainly within the scope of something we could look at. Are you talking mostly about the resolution on getting to a final contract, or after there's been a dispute about what happens on a project?
Well, usually it's a dispute over change orders and whatnot, and looking at if you feel, as the IG, that the change order was appropriate in the first place, and then also that all practices were in place to make sure that the money was appropriately spent, or that way. Again, there's a lot of change orders that come before this body, and I think another set of eyes before that process even gets to us is that you have seen that it was initially verified and needed. Again, and some of the times is just because the scope of work isn't clearly dictated and things come up as a necessity. We get that. So I just think it's another form or fashion of accounting that makes sure that the money's being spent correctly.
Yeah, it's certainly within the scope of our office. So I'd be happy to talk to you more about how we might get at some of those issues.
That, and when you talk about tracking the risk management component, there's a department in Caltrans that has liability issues to the public. And do you track the legal aspect of settling versus defending going forward, and making any kind of determinations if it was appropriate going that way too? Because I think that's an area that is not generally watched, and it's something that could be considerable savings if it's been haphazardly. I'm not saying it is, but if it was haphazardly, just settling instead of defending.
We have not, to my knowledge, had much interaction with the legal office and settlements. And I will tell you, I don't have an attorney on staff, so I would be hesitant to say that we would have that expertise. I will tell you that in different types of issues have come up since I've been here, and certainly over the years, that involve audits of construction contracts or audits of particular agreements that are then helpful to the department in addressing a litigation issue. So, I think we have interacted more on that side of things, of helping provide information that's used in a case. We have not been involved in reviewing settlements or anything along those lines.
I just think it's something that might be, when you're talking about millions of dollars that affect the taxpayers, it's something that might be weighed in on, at least to say that that the appropriate actions have been taken place.
I appreciate that.
And then also, I know that we narrowed your scope, what we initially intended in SB1, because we wanted you all transportation, all facets. And so I'd like to have a talk with you if you might have the capacity to expand your role legislatively to oversee another agency that just had an audit and who desperately needs.
Sure. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
I think Commissioner Dunn wanted to comment.
I think I'm on. Thank you, Irina. Thank you for your report. One of the things that I found as a proponent to try to get Prop 6 to die was using your office. And I think it was really important to the public to have an IG take a look at these projects and give them confidence. So I really can't thank you enough for that. And I recognize that this is your first report. I'm wondering, I also love that you want to engage with the commission a little bit more in the future, knowing this is your first report. And I would love to, I think, talk about an advisory board or something to be able to help you and then figure out what projects might need to be reviewed. If you could give me some context here first, and you may not be able to answer this because it is still new, but in an agency of just, let's say, 22,000 at Caltrans plus other agencies that you looked at, what is your initial assessment of the projects that you've reviewed, the processes, et cetera? Would you be able to give them a grade of C+, B+, A-? Or is it too soon to be able to think in context of what you're seeing so far?
I don't want to seem like I won't commit to a grade or an assessment. I think I would in the future, but I do feel like it's premature.
Okay.
I don't feel, and I think you'll see that in the report, is not a lot of statements about what my impression is or anything like that. That may be something that's helpful in the future, and I don't think I would hesitate to say it if I felt like I could back it up, but I don't feel comfortable at this point.
I got it. The other thing is, from a public perspective, I understand the key findings. I kind of had to dig through here and ask myself some questions. What does she mean by what she said here? When you have 405,000 in unallowable question costs or 33 million in unallowable or questionable costs, are we seeking reimbursement of that? What is the process in getting that money back?
Yeah, and this is one of the, I feel like the report is going to be the peeling the onion metaphor backwards. Yeah. So in the future, there would be more layers of information. Right. I don't think that we have it right now. I don't think that there, I think that in the past, and I think this reflects the nature of it having been an internal audit office where the audits are handed off to a program to address the issues, that there wasn't much tracking of what might have happened. So if we have an unallowable or a question cost, the auditors may not have been, they may know nothing about what happened. And we did not have a tracking system to say, well, whatever happened to that recommendation to recover costs or get more documentation or whatever was necessary. So that's something that we've put in place. So I think there would be more context for, there was this amount of unallowable costs and this much was recovered, and for the amount that wasn't recovered, here's why. That's what I'd be looking for in the future, is to find out, well, what happened? And I've asked some of those questions now, but I don't have a complete picture to be able to report.
That's terrific, because I feel like I've got halfway through my novel, but I haven't gotten to the end of the story.
Yeah, I think
so
that's fair.
we know every story has a protagonist and a villain and the end. Yeah. And we want to be able to get to the end of the story. So that would be helpful to me.
I appreciate that feedback.
The other one is, again, recognizing that we're all under the gun to deliver for the public efficiencies and effectiveness in the system. And clearly that was the intent, I think, in having your process. Is there a way that maybe we can look at, I don't know anybody that knows how to communicate better to the public than Jim Arp, for example. Is there a way we can look at putting this in language that we might more broadly share publicly so that they would understand the words that you're putting in writing here? And again, you get a pass because it's the first one.
Yeah.
But if you could think in terms of creating a dashboard, I mean, your business organizations would love to be able to say, look, just because we got tortured on Prop 6 doesn't mean we're going to not get tortured in the future. So to have that documentation to be able to say, here's what's happening and it's being done, and here's a dashboard that a general public might be able to understand. Would you be open to thinking about that?
Absolutely. And I think part of doing this presentation, and there are other folks who've asked to get a little more information about what we've been working on, is to kind of hear how are people taking it, what are they getting from it, and then be able to think about how to make it more accessible, especially to the public members who don't know what a lot of this stuff is.
They don't know what this means.
I tried to, at least this time, I started with the premise of not issuing hundreds of pages of audit findings that no one would ever read, and trying to get it down to something.
Kudos to you for
but
that.
It's definitely could use the next step, which is to think about, well, then how does this translate to the average person who might want to know what these things are?
That would be great.
Definitely we'll work on that.
Thank you. Because in addition to that, watching or reading that this is what we've discovered and now we referred it back to Caltrans to continue investigation, that sounds like, not good. That sounds like rotational, review. So to think about how we word things that, we found these things that Caltrans needs to fix, so we gave it back to Caltrans to fix. I wouldn't have ended my story there. I would have said, and I'm going to be following up with them, that kind of thing. So just little hints for the future.
Appreciate it.
And we would love to, I know the commission would love to continue to engage. So thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Burke?
About what is the magnitude of the number of issues that have been raised with you, whistleblower or complaints? And are they mostly internal? And in terms of the follow-up, I would assume that in a sense the agency itself does the follow-up, but I would wonder who else you work with, and it would be, I think, very helpful to us if it was not at the end of the year we heard about them. If we had some idea of those issues that are being raised as they come up during the year. And I also think that makes it possible to resolve some of the issues.
Well, on the latter point, I'm happy to provide this information more often. I mean, this is just the year end. Certainly, we can do some interim reporting. On the magnitude, I mean, I think, on the investigations and the ethics helpline, both the numbers, I guess here I would feel like it's okay to make a statement that they're pretty small in comparison to the size of the organization. So I would not say that the number of investigations is alarming by any stretch. I think it's within the realm of what kind of happens in employment issues. We did not report on the investigation side anything about what happens on the back end because, I'm not these folks' employer. Caltrans is the employer, and we do have a process. I meet with the director and the Office of Disciplinary Services. We're meeting on a monthly basis. We go through all of the new investigations on a monthly basis. And we're also hearing a report on what's happening on the discipline side. So I'm not tracking them on a one-to-one basis, but I'm confident that the department and the director takes the issues very seriously, and that there is discipline on the back end side of it. Again, though, the discipline side is clearly within the scope of the director and her management.
I would hope, though, if there was something of a certain magnitude that comes to your attention as it related to a program or policy, that you would share it with us, not at the end of the year, but at the time that you become aware of it. And my experience with various inspector generals, that the effectiveness is really the ability to know about the issue and for us to make sure that it's corrected. because in many instances, it's a matter of the regulations or the application of the regulations. It may be very well the just the administration of it. And that's the really big issue that we would have to face. And I would hope that you'd feel free to advise us of those issues that you see of a certain seriousness.
And I would, I would, and I think that's a discussion I had during my confirmation process with both the legislative staff and the members about the ability to bring issues up, especially those of a serious nature, to the agency secretary, to the commission, to the legislature, and I, without a doubt, would be doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? I just want to go back to Commissioner Dunn's suggestion of an advisory board or an advisory cabinet or whatever label you want to put on it. But I think your slide on the communication strategies, which has half red and half blue, I think the red side would be an excellent outline to pull from to build an advisory board for, because it seems like you could do a zillion different tasks, and you do have limited resources. And so I too would like to encourage you to consider. I think it would be good for everybody. I think it's good to have discussions. We can't just allocate our resources when we hear, from one voice, because on the greater scale of it, it may be, so I would want to encourage you to do that, and I know that we would be happy to participate in any way that we can, but I think it'd be a good idea. To go back to the cost savings, I had a question that might be more for Chair Fraser on the 100 million savings. When we put the NEPA-CEQA savings in there, we had been doing that NEPA-CEQA prior to SB1, right?
Yes.
So I kind of feel, and this might just be my personal feeling about the public's expectations, I thought the promise we made to them was to find 100 million new dollars, and while those were new by definition of new projects that we saved, I don't know, and so maybe the question isn't for you, but it's for Chairman Fraser. But should we be looking for totally new things that we have done because we have this new resource? And so I don't know if you want to answer that, or not Secretary Fraser, pardon me. Chair Fraser.
I maybe will stay away from the policy question that the legislature put in place with that language. Maybe I'm gonna not weigh into that, but I will tell you that the process that we use to look at the methodology on the issues that were identified for the first report, I think that the folks that we worked with in the department found that to be very beneficial, and now there are numerous conversations that are planned over the next several weeks where they're looking at, our folks who worked on that project are going to come in and say, here are the ways that you think about identifying, tracking, and coming up with new efficiency savings. So I know that I'll say Jim Davis's name because he's leading a lot of the
what
this
hat
effort.
is he wearing today?
So Jim is definitely pushing everyone to bring those ideas forward, and I think that this experience we had is really beneficial to the department in that they're using that experience to say, hey, we have some help for you to figure out the best way to identify, come up with methodologies, track the savings going forward. So I think that they are pushing to add new things to that list.
Okay. Yes, Chair Fraser?
So it was an intention of new money as far as the Senator Bell and myself were looking at it, but also it wasn't a ceiling. It was intended as a base to start, so it could be 200 million if they could find it. So we're looking forward any type of asset value that we can bring towards that, and they're helping us with that.
Well, and also today at our project delivery meeting, we had a good discussion around time and how time is money. So with that, we probably need to move on, but thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation. So thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 26.
Yes, Commissioners, tab 26 is an informational item, and Mr. Jonathan Weinert from Bosch will talk about electric bicycles as an innovative method to increase options available for active transportation. E-bikes open bicycle riding to many groups of people that may not have been able to ride a bike before and provide additional options for others to reduce their reliance on automobiles. And with that, we'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Garth. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Jonathan Weinert, and I'm here today to talk to you about how a very simple but powerful transportation innovation, the electric bicycle, is on the brink of a boom, really, in California. And Garth, are you controlling the slides?
Well, you've got the clicker up here.
Oh. Okay, great. Before I begin, I'd like to just give you a quick introduction to myself. I come here today to you wearing 3 hats. One hat, I'm from Bosch. These are our products. We're a supplier in the e-bike industry, and we're based in Irvine, California, headquartered in Stuttgart, Germany. That's one hat. The second hat, I come as a researcher of e-bikes. And this picture that you see on the left, that was one of the first e-bikes I ever saw back in 2006 when I started my doctoral research under the guidance of one of your colleagues, actually Dr. Dan Sperling from ITS Davis. And third hat that I wear is the e-bike commuter. So the picture on the right, you see, that's my rig. And when I'm not commuting to and from work, sometimes I carry precious cargo.
Cute.
So e-bikes, they've come a long way since 2006. 2 of the biggest innovations in e-bikes I bring to you today to see. This lithium-ion battery is way cheaper, lighter, and lasts longer than they did back in 2006. And the second innovation is pedal assist e-bike technology. This is what you see in between the pedals, and this is what makes e-bikes feel like a regular bicycle. And by the way, they make us, the riders, feel like we're 19 again, which is a nice feeling. Some e-bikes also have a throttle. But most e-bikes out there on the streets today are pedaled, and thus they preserve the healthy human element of cycling and all the societal benefits that cycling brings. So, why are e-bikes important? One main reason is they're getting more people out on 2 wheels. And one example that illustrates this point perfectly, it's from a study that was done in the UK. It was a study done in the UK by Steer, and it found that, okay, we all know traditional bike share, it's plagued by one key problem. Really, it's the main users are young, fit men. And this study looked at this UK bike share system. Once it converted from traditional bikes to electric bikes, it actually attracted significantly more women. There we go. I like that.
There we go.
So, a little bit more on how people use e-bikes. And I want to highlight the work from 2 researchers, John MacArthur from Portland State University and Chris Cherry from University of Tennessee. They've been exploring why people e-bike. And last year, they surveyed 2,000 e-bike owners, and it reveals some really important, interesting findings. First, they found that people use e-bikes for 2 main reasons, and you'll see it on this slide. They use it as a transportation tool to commute, and they also use it to exercise and recreate. They also found that e-bike owners actually ride more often after converting to an e-bike. And you see that in the green bars to the right side compared to the orange bars on the left side. We at Bosch, we conducted our own survey as well, and we found that typically e-bike riders ride about 3 times more than bicyclists, and they're riding longer distances. Most importantly, I think for California and mobility, and to the benefit of many of our clogged streets that we travel on to get here, John and Chris found that e-bike trips seem to be replacing car trips most often, roughly 40% of the trips, which you'll see in this chart. So what would you have used if you didn't have your e-bike? So what is this? I also wanted to paint a picture. Okay, we know how people use e-bikes now. I wanted to give you a sense of what the e-bike market looks like today. And this just shows you that sales in the US, small, 200,000 pieces per year. As a point of comparison, Europe is years ahead of us, and they boast nearly 10 times as many sales. And this is in part due to them having much better bicycling infrastructure in their cities. But we're on a path as well, but we're sort of in the initiation phases of market growth. So not surprisingly, okay, that's the e-bike market in the US overall. Let's narrow in on California. Not surprisingly, as you would expect, California again is at the epicenter of a new transportation revolution, the e-bikes. And we find that California is the epicenter of the e-bike market in terms of users, but it's also the epicenter of the e-bike industry. And you'll see some names of some of the companies and where they're located. They're mainly e-bike manufacturers or e-bike suppliers. Some of you, if you travel to Sacramento quite a bit, you may have seen the Jump e-bike share that's really popular now. Exactly, and they're expanding quite rapidly. San Francisco, San Diego, Sacramento, and more. So in summary, why are e-bikes important to California? I'd like to quote John Burke, who is the CEO of Trek Bicycles, and he often says, and I love this analogy, bicycles, whether they're electric or acoustic, bicycles are a cheap date to solve society's three biggest problems: obesity, climate change, and traffic congestion. Right, and by the way, they may also boost. By the way, they may also boost California's economy as well.
It's the women of the commission.
So in short, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention to this topic, and I would also like to thank the California Bike Coalition and Portland State University and the University of Tennessee for their help on this presentation. Thank you, and appreciate your questions.
Question, yes, I'll go Commissioner Gometti, followed by Commissioner Dunn.
Jonathan, thank you very much for the presentation. I think you guys have come a long way. I think these things are super. My question is where does an e-bike fit in? And what I mean by that is, in San Francisco where I live, we have scooters, that are running around that are electric. And we also have Jump, which are the electric bikes. When you're riding a scooter, you have to wear a helmet. There's safety requirements. They're treated like a car. They drive in the car lanes, etc. An electric bike is not a regular bicycle. I ride a regular bicycle around the city, and we have bike lanes, etc. Where does the electric bike, is it helmet required? Is it going to be required? Do they get to ride in the lanes of travel, or I'm kind of confused as to where the electric bike is going to fit into all this.
So 3 years ago, California passed a law about e-bikes, and we call it the 3-class e-bike law. Class 1 and 2 e-bikes, which this system, pedal assist, is class 1, 20 miles per hour top speed, pedal assist. It has all the rights and responsibilities of regular bicycles. Class 2, 20 miles per hour top speed, throttle, same deal. It has all the rights to use the bicycle infrastructure that's out there today. Class 3 goes 28 miles per hour top speed, pedal assist, and that's limited. It can't use the same, it can really only use street bike lanes. It can't use class 1 bike paths where you might find many pedestrians or cyclists. So E-bikes are divided into 3 types. One type that goes higher speed cannot use all the same bike infrastructure, and you're mandated to wear a helmet as well.
I guess I'm wondering how you're going to police that.
Right now, it's not policed very. It hasn't become. Yeah,
it's a new technology.
Exactly.
I understand that, and you're going to have to work out the bugs. But
exactly. I think until there is a, as I've seen, it's not quite policed. Like if there's a class 3 bike on a bike path.
we're not talking about the little bird scooters or the lime things that are all over the streets. You know, it is different. I get it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Dunn? Are we finished? I'm sorry.
Well, I think it's
Okay. Commissioner Dunn.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So 3 to 4 hours to charge, that's kind of a long time. Is there technology coming where you can speed up the charge time? What are you guys looking at from a...
We do have a fast charger that just came out in Europe. It speeds up the charge time, but keep in mind, for 3 to 4 hours of charge time, which is about a quarter worth of electricity, 25 cents, this will take you up to 100 miles.
Up to, but it says 20 to 100 miles. 20.
If you're on a really high level of assist, then maybe you only get 20. If you put it in eco mode, where you're just kind of sipping the electricity and putting in a lot of your own human quad power, then you could get 100 miles. And it depends what kind of road you're traveling on as well, whether it's really steep or flat.
Okay, that kind of security of knowing where that range is, that's kind of important, especially for women, so that they don't feel like I got to sit and wait for someone to pick me up because I don't have it charged for 3 to 4 hours. Yeah,
it's a great point.
I mean, you still have to do the bike. Yeah, exactly. Bike still works, right?
Right. You can still, you're right.
You actually have
exactly.
to work, right?
Worst
So
case scenario.
I'm trying to decide: do I buy one of these or do I buy a Vespa? Right? So that's the issue.
Okay, yeah. Worst case scenario, you pedal home on your own.
Got it.
Make sure
And
you
so
live downhill.
What is the cost for this? What does it run?
Between $1,000 for some of the low end, all the way up to $6,000 or $7,000.
Like buying a motorcycle.
Yeah, some of them have really state-of-the-art, high-end technology. The cost of a motorcycle. And I brought 3 models out. They're at the entrance, so you can kind of see the range from $3,000 to about $5,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And
do we give incentives? Are there ARB incentives for those, or? What? No? Linda said no. Huh?
Yeah, there are not currently incentives. I know, Cal Bike Coalition is working on that. And just to keep in mind, Europe's way ahead of us on this. UK just started offering incentives for cargo e-bikes to carry goods or people.
Every day is a freight day.
Yeah. Right. And France and Sweden started offering incentives recently, and the market's just taken off.
I thought we heard the incentives. Less greenhouse gas, less weight, and less congestion.
Well, yeah, but if we want to,
What more incentives do you need?
I think we're going to fight over who
Have
gets
any of
to
our
ride
money, if that's what
these.
you're getting.
No. I asked if ARB had put money into it, so cap and trade dollars. So.
Let's give them some cap and trade money. That'd be fine with me.
Commissioner Arp, I yield the floor to you. Did you have a question?
That was it. Jen's got it all figured out. I got it all figured out.
Oh, the troops are getting wild here. Commissioner Kehoe.
Thank you. Good presentation. Very interesting.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you're a product of UC Davis. That's a great program.
Thanks.
Just one comment back to Commissioner Dunn. Range anxiety, I drive an electric vehicle, a hybrid, a plug-in, but one thing I do believe, range anxiety used to bug me a lot. It was a source of worry. I still have some hesitation about a full electric because charging can be a challenge even in Southern California. But the more you use an electric vehicle, your range anxiety goes down. You just get more familiar with the vehicle, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's full battery, or I imagine even if it's a bike. And so that's one element, but it does take familiarity, so it's kind of counterintuitive. And then that was just a comment, but I didn't realize they were that expensive. So can you tell me, when I see all these orange jump bikes deployed in San Diego, I can walk away from my house and see 5 or 10 of them between my house and the restaurants. How much are those bikes each? What are these investments like when they come into a market?
Well, it's hard for me to say about the electric bike share bikes because they're built to last years, and they're built for somebody to throw one and
in a dumpster,
throw it in a dumpster on the sidewalk. So those costs are not comparable to personal use e-bikes.
I guess my question would be, if it were the higher, several $1,000s, that's a really big investment for a company to come into a community. I'm just a little wondering what their business plan consists of if they're putting $2,000 or $3,000 bikes on every corner.
Yeah, so just a point of reference. In New York City, Lyft/Motivate, their e-bike share bikes are getting about 14 trips per day. And if you calculate, I don't know, $2 to $3 per trip, they're generating a fair bit of revenue per day, and they probably pay for themselves within, maybe less than a year. You're welcome. And by the way, the e-bikes, about the point about range anxiety, all the e-bikes have a special computer on the handlebar where you can see your range real time. And it's just like electric cars today, where it knows sort of how you're riding, and it'll calculate your estimated range until zero battery. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have one public speaker on this, so Dave Snyder, can you come forward?
Thank you. My name is Dave Snyder. I'm the executive director of the Bicycle Coalition, and Jonathan is too polite to thank himself, so I want to start by thanking Jonathan and Bosch for that excellent presentation, and our staffer, Linda Kamushian. And I wanted to emphasize the importance of this presentation for you as commissioners in your role with transportation investments. And I'll go back to some of yesterday's comments and the frankly bad news that we got about the trends in transportation and how difficult we are finding it to reduce vehicle miles traveled and therefore greenhouse gas emissions while maintaining mobility and maintaining a strong economy. One of the biggest things that we learned yesterday is the drop in transit ridership, which is a huge disappointment to a lot of us, except on those transit lines that have a high frequency and are very high quality. We're finding that people take those transit kinds of trips. So that's where our dollars are going to have to go in transit. We're going to have to invest in fewer lines at very high frequency and very high quality transit. How are we going to get people to those lines? The bike, we know, is a very fantastic way to get people to those trips. And we're finding that when we build the infrastructure to make it safe, people do it. In the Bay Area, at BART stations and at Caltrain stations, the number of people who get to those stations by bicycle is more than 10% at a handful of stations in those two systems, more than 10%, because a few places have made it safe. And we have to do a lot more of that. You all need to really figure out how you can invest in safe routes to transit so that people can make that trip by bike. It's not just safety, it's also this cultural thing that bicycling is hard. You know, and it is a little bit hard. It's hard. It's not as hard as people think, but it's a little bit hard. And if you have kids to take to school, if you have steep hills, it's practically impossible. E-bikes change that. E-bikes completely change that. E-bikes are fun. You feel like you're 19, or if you're 50, you feel like you have a stiff tailwind. It's fantastic. So I think that for you all, I urge you to consider that e-bikes enable California to be like, let's say, Germany, not a too ridiculous comparison on modern country, where 10% of all trips are by bike. And the benefits to the health and to the economy and to the transportation system in Germany are huge. So if you don't think that bicycling can play that role in California, I urge you to reconsider that, and I especially urge you to take a step outside and go for a spin on one of those bikes and see for yourself. Thanks very much for inviting us to give this presentation.
Okay, can I ask Jonathan a question? On your chart that talked about what these rides were substituting for taking an automobile, and you pointed out 46%, but right next to that, the column said they were replacing a different bike trip or a walk or another form of, or transit, I think. So that first column?
The second column that shows...
No, the first, yeah, if you count the descriptor as the first column, the next column over. Can we pull that slide up real fast? I know we're out of time and we've got to cede this facility to others shortly. It was trips replaced by e-bikes as the heading of the slide.
Yeah, and it refers to the trip we asked, or Chris and John asked e-bike owners for the trip that they're thinking about, what would they have taken had they not had their e-bike? And I believe the slide shows that 40% of the trips represented, the alternative would have been automobile. So it's
46%.
It's a 40%. Or sorry, or percentage of VMT. Yeah, actually.
Yeah. No, it's just that a lot of people naturally would have gone on a regular bike had they not had the e-bike. That is understandable. What surprised me in that data was that as many as, I think it's 46%, would have taken a car.
Right. Okay. I just thought 40, and we're looking at declining transit ridership, so I was trying to drill down and learn a little more. But
the other thing in that chart, which, if I may, excuse me, just to draw your attention to, is that the average distance of that typical trip is 9 miles, which was a high number to me. That the median, or the mean, or I don't know which it is, car trip that it's replacing is a 9-mile trip. So we're not talking about 1 to 2 mile trips. We're talking about serious transportation impact.
Okay, well, we'll probably want to drill down with you and understand a little more of the information we're learning. So, yes, Chair Fraser.
Just wanted to access, yesterday pursuant to our co-meeting, we talked about technology taking forefront and investing in it. This would be a great opportunity when we look at the investment that the Air Board does with the e-vehicles, the incentive programs, I think up to like $35,000. This would be something that would be absolutely paramount to invest in as first and last mile is accomplished. And so you look at the differential, that what it does is, I think this is probably a good bill idea, that going out forward and making sure that technology is embraced and that alternate transportation is being embraced and going forward. So, look forward to working with you, but I think that the Air Board, this is a perfect opportunity for their incentive program.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Commissioner Madaffer?
Just real briefly, I just want to say this is outstanding. I mean, these are the kind of things, just as Chair Fraser just said, I use, when Jump came to San Diego, I use that thing all the time. I like the e-bike. It's easier to use, the app works, everything is so good about it, and you get around. And the one stat I remember hearing, I don't know the exact number, but it was something like with Uber, something like 40 or 50% of all of their rides are like 2 miles or less in cars. So if those can be replaced with scooters and e-bikes, you're taking a 2,000 to 4,000 pound vehicle off the road, you're eliminating GHG. It's really a win-win for that, and it improves active transportation. It's something that definitely the Commission should be advocating.
Okay. Alrighty, thank you very much. This is fascinating. We'll be out to take a look. So, okay, we're going to move to item 27. Terry, please.
Okay. And to my husband who's watching today, yes, I want an e-bike for Christmas.
I think we'd all say that to our Santa.
Commissioners, item number 27 is an informational item, and Ellen Greenberg, the Deputy Director for Caltrans Office of Sustainability, will be providing an update on the Zero Emission Vehicle Program.
Hi, I guess it's time to say good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your attention. I know we're at the close of the day, and it's been a very full 2 days, soon to be a full 3 days. This is an update. We're going to be returning to a few of the topics that we discussed last time I spoke with you about the Department ZEV program, which was over a year ago. And we do have a slide deck that will hopefully appear. Fabulous. So we've organized our activities and our thinking and communication about the Department ZEV program into 5 parts: public charging, workplace charging for private vehicles owned by the department's employees, partnering, which covers a whole range of activities that support development and deployment of ZEV technologies, fleet-related activities, and support for freight technology adoption for a range of freight activities. I know that every day is Freight Day. This presentation, we're concentrating on the first 3 program areas because there are recent events to update you on. So I hope that we'll come back at another meeting to talk about freight and fleet. So we've already touched on the zero emission vehicle area in a number of the conversations today. This is just a reminder of the state policy framework around ZEV adoption and deployment. And the key update this year in 2018 was Executive Order B4818 that actually increased, made more aggressive the state's goals for putting zero-emission vehicles on California roadways, with a goal of 5 million ZEVs on California roads by 2030. And along with that vehicle goal is a goal of 250,000 ZEV chargers during that same period. So a very ambitious goal. I also like to point out that in terms of the state's efforts, alongside of all the efforts on the vehicle side, has been this very meaningful set of activities around shifting our energy sources to increase share of renewables, right? So we're not just talking about plugging in cars, we're talking about plugging in cars and powering them with renewable energy. And as you may be aware, in September, the governor signed SB 100, putting the state on a path to implement zero carbon electricity grid by 2045. So those separate efforts are very much related to each other. So in the public charging area, we've talked previously about the 30 and 30 program, which is the DC fast charging program that the department has implemented as part of the mandate under the governor's 2016 ZEV action plan. The commission has programmed 11 projects that include DC fast chargers at 37 locations. These locations were chosen in consultation with the Energy Commission, and you have in your packet maps that show the locations of the 30 and 30 projects. So one of the issues that we discussed previously is the federal restriction on commercial activity at these locations, at the safety and roadside rest areas, and also at some, but not all, park and ride locations. So this has been a big constraint in terms of looking for partners from the commercial side to go in with us in installing these chargers. So we wanted to make commission members aware that we have an application in to Federal Highway Administration, a preliminary SEP 15 application that would enable the department to pilot fee-based public charging at these locations. So that's something that's underway. We've just had a preliminary response, and we're waiting for some further back and forth on this preliminary application. We have had success in securing some partnering funds from local air districts, and we have received some grant funds in Districts 5 and District 6 for those chargers. So we're pleased about that partnering opportunity. These maps, a little hard to read, but I want to point out that a number of our locations are contributing to an effort that's referred to as the West Coast Electric Highway. That's actually a binational project with British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California to provide consistent charging opportunities for north-south travelers. There have been a number of inquiries about opportunities at park and rides, and there are indeed valuable opportunities and possibilities for EV charging at Caltrans park and ride locations. Caltrans District 11 in San Diego is kind of out in front with this, and they have some early experience with charging at park and rides, and they have a really successful effort underway now with SDG&E. SDG&E are investing $4 million in park and ride installations with both level 2 and fast chargers. The project was actually developed jointly by Caltrans District 11 and SDG&E, and it was specifically named in their proposal to the California PUC. So they approved an investment plan for SDG&E's charging investment that included that project that's now underway. So we are now working to identify additional locations that are Caltrans park and ride locations that are not under these federal restrictions. So there are a number of criteria. Our Division of Right-of-Way are working to really sort through and identify locations where we might be able to partner with private interests who require an opportunity to charge the public, to have a fee-based program. And those criteria relate to whether the sites are immediately accessible from the interstate highway system or on the interstate system, and also whether federal funds have been used in purchase or maintenance of those sites. And that's the kind of more difficult one, just to get the back information and the history of these sites. This FHWA application I mentioned, the SEP 15 request, would open up conceivably a larger set of the park and rides, possibly even all of the park and rides, depending on how that might progress. So that's an exciting opportunity that we are looking into. On the workplace charging side, we've benefited from two partnering opportunities that have come about through legal settlements. And one has provided investment in the make-ready infrastructure. So that's essentially everything but the actual charger, the extension of the electricity, trenching requirements, and building essentially a pad, and then the charging unit itself gets placed on that. So we already have seen the installation of 155 make-readies installed at 17 Caltrans locations that have come through funding through the NRG legal settlement, and we're anticipating another round with 160 installations at 18 locations. So when we get to that total of 315, we'll have combined investment of just over $1 million through this source. So we're very pleased with that. And that's helping us move towards meeting the requirement established by the Department of General Services in their management memo 1607, which requires the department to have 5% of all of our workplace parking spaces equipped with electric vehicle charging. When we met last, there were a number of comments about whether there was an opportunity to benefit, for the department to benefit from the Volkswagen settlement. And I'm very pleased to say that we are in an agreement with EV Connect, which is a contractor to Electrify America, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Volkswagen. Electrify America is actually administering the Volkswagen settlement funds under an investment plan approved by the Air Resources Board. We have been working on an ongoing collaborative basis. We've been having regular calls with the Department of General Services, GovOps, and GoBiz to navigate the process of entering into an agreement with EV Connect. We succeeded in signing an agreement a few months ago, and we're now identifying specific locations for investment by EV Connect. So I can share the fact that at this point we've signed off on 14 Caltrans sites where we'll see investment in 60 dual chargers at a value of just over $1 million. We have another 9 sites in process and another 17 sites in discussion. So we're expecting about 180 dual chargers. So these chargers will be installed and then maintained and operated by EV Connect until the end of 2026, at which point the equipment will transfer ownership to Caltrans. So we're really pleased about this. And we will also be looking to potential opportunities in the second VW investment plan with Electrify America. So the Air Board will be taking action on the Cycle 2 investment plan at its meeting next week. And what we anticipate is there may be some additional opportunities and some opportunities in different geographies, because the initial plan permitted investment only in 4 metropolitan statistical areas. So we're able to use that investment from EV Connect in the Los Angeles region, the San Diego region, a portion, but not all of the Bay Area, Fresno, and Sacramento. But we are anticipating that we'll be able to look to take advantage of that VW money, perhaps in some additional parts of the state. So we're very pleased about that. I want to mention also that PG&E has a program that's been approved by the PUC that may provide an opportunity for us to get some rebate funds for any chargers that the department does need to pay for. So that's another partnership opportunity we will be looking into. On the partnering side, this was another topic that came up. Understandably, your comments last time we spoke were very supportive of our being collaborative with and having ongoing coordination with other partners in the state agencies, and we've really been doing that, I think, very successfully. The PG&E effort, we've been waiting for DGS and their legal team to come to agreement on legal terms with PG&E, so we have that as a template. We were out ahead on the agreement with EV Connect, and other agencies have been using our agreement as a template. So we feel like that those working relationships have continued to provide benefit to the department as well as to our partners. We also wanted to just highlight the grants to transit operators statewide as another part of the program, and there have been several comments about the transition to electric transit vehicles and alternative fuel transit vehicles, and that's part of the work that our Division of Rail and Mass Transit has done in terms of administering grant programs. So that's what I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good stuff.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Do we have questions? Yes, Commissioner Kehoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ellen. A lot of good news there. So just on the, or going in the right direction for sure. On the park and rides.
Yes.
There's a pilot project for consumers to buy electricity. Is that it?
So on the park and ride, we are requesting permission from federal highways, right, to enable fee-based public charging at the park and rides. Yes.
So in simple terms, that's the driver would be paying to charge.
The driver would be paying, and that would, we see that as unlocking the possibility of us partnering with private interests so that we can, give them an encroachment permit and they can operate on Caltrans right-of-way.
Okay. That's good. That's a step in the right direction. What about just a pure commercial operation? How, where we could have a contractor come in, install chargers, and either have the driver pay, or the contractor has a business plan where the contractor can pay for electricity.
Right, well, so that's what we would hope to get permission to pilot, and which is currently prohibited under federal
What's the
regulations.
timing of the pilot application? Okay.
We're still we just had a response to our preliminary application, so
Okay.
we will, we'll keep you apprised.
The last time you spoke to us, I think some of us thought the I-8 corridor in San Diego County and East County, San Diego in general, was, didn't have enough chargers. Really, are we improving that situation? Can we go back to the map?
I'm looking at the map, and I'm also going to look at the District 11 information.
And I do think District 11 and SDG&E partnership is great, but that's mostly in the city where there's a whole lot of drivers. That's good.
Right.
But when you drive into Arizona or Julian,
Right.
some people right here on this dais do, there's not a lot of chargers up there.
I want to recognize that we have very strong staff leadership in this area in District 11, and Barbie Valentine is a senior planner. And I met with her last week. She mentioned that in addition to these projects, she's been meeting with some of the tribal Staff around locating charging on some of the tribal properties, which might speak to, I think, some of these longer range journeys. I will follow up with you, because other than that, I don't have specific
We
information.
can definitely do it offline. The
Sure.
tribes are a great pursuit in East County, so that would be a good idea. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Medaffer and then Commissioner Dunn, and then we're going to get evicted from this space, so.
Thank you is really what I want to say. I think this is great. The more charging we have everywhere, the faster adoption's going to happen. And a postscript to my story at LA Metro yesterday, I want to tell you, after I did finally get the app to work, I was able to charge successfully there. Cost me $3, which was a heck of a deal. And again, the story was every single charging spot at LA Metro was filled. In fact, I heard from the former District 7 director that I denied her the ability to plug her electric car in because there were not enough spots. So the more charging we have, the more people will start driving electric cars. And to my friends at CARB, GHG will continue to go down.
The demand is there.
Okay, Commissioner Dunn.
Just a quick question. Thanks, Ellen. And I know you're going to talk about it another time, but right now, what percentage of the Caltrans fleet is ZEV?
The Caltrans light-duty fleet is 8% ZEV vehicles, and in our fleet acquisition plan for 16-17, we had a 10% goal, and we actually made it to a 30% purchase. So it's about changing over the purchase as the vehicles are, as the vehicle fleet turns over. So we're at 8% now.
It's 8%.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair Fraser, you're one of us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate all the work that's going into this, but I'm hoping that the maintenance and the inspection is robust, because some of these stations I've gone to and seen out of order. I think it has to be very, very prescriptive of what the expectations are. Spending a lot of money, but we want to be able to utilize them on an ongoing basis. So I'm hoping that all the hard work that's been put in place is actually captured by a very robust inspection and maintenance schedule, because don't rely on the public to tell you if they're broken.
Well, with respect to the workplace chargers, we have quite specific terms in the agreement with EV Connect. They have responsibility through 2026, and we will have the recourse of going to the Air Board, which administers the higher level agreement if we're not satisfied.
Well, again, one of the things that Mr. Medaffer has been touting, and rightfully so, is the advance of technology. If they had a reporting that the unit itself to some central base was saying that this is broken, going forward, we just need to be able to utilize every resource that we put out there.
And all of those chargers from EV Connect will be smart chargers. We will get the data from their use, and that'll also enable them to track whether they are functioning properly.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so thank you, Ellen, and
You're
sorry
welcome.
we
Thank
are
you.
having to wrap up. But we are going to move now to the consent calendar, so we can do that. I need to remove item 43 from the consent calendar, and we will take that up tomorrow. But let's see, Terry, are you up on the
I'm
consent?
ready. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioners, for items 38 through 48, they're on the consent calendar. However, as you noted, 43 is being pulled. Please note the following changes to the consent calendar items as documented on the change list. For item number 46, for both the agenda and the book item, there are revisions to the TCEP resolution number and the FP resolution number. On item number 47, under background, the following should be added. The deallocation of TCIF funding for TCIF projects 35, 37, 40, 41, and 99 is due to a limitation in using state funds for certain project costs and not due to construction cost savings. In addition, the note in the vote box has been modified. So with those changes, I would ask the Commission to approve items 38 through 42 and numbers 44 through 48 on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Whoa, that was loud and robust. We have a motion by Commissioner Arp and a
Brain is
second.
fried.
A second by Commissioner Dunn, I think. Any discussion? Yes, Commissioner Gometti.
On item 38, I just want to make a comment that I think this is a silly thing to do a mitigated negative deck for basically remodeling some situations on the BART stations. They can get that with a condition of approval. I don't know why we're getting into the weeds of a mitigated negative deck to do canopies over escalators. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think you would do it in any other instance. So Bart needs to be told that.
Duly noted. So any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. So we will adjourn the meeting today in honor of Bob Wolf. We recently lost Bob. He was a giant in the region, a giant in the state. He served the state as Undersecretary in Transportation and Housing, or whatever the title of the agency was at the time, and he was also a member of this board and chair at one time, I believe. Bob was a good friend to many of us. He was a voracious reader. He loved to solve problems, and we're all gonna miss him. So with that, I would like to close the meeting in his honor, if you'll join me.